Good morning, members, officers and KPMG. I would like to introduce our new members, Lynn Dean and Dean Hodges. I would like to thank previous members, Gary Bentley and Gary Hells, for their contributions. This meeting will be webcast live for transparency and public record purposes and will be archived for 12 months. The recording will also be uploaded to YouTube. So I'd like to start. Apologies, Liam, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillors Munro, Bagley, Parton and Luca, and also Kate Loader. Thank you, Chair.
Any declarations of interest? So I'd like to go on to the one-item agenda for today. It is the annual Auditors report for 2024 and 2025. I'll hand over to KPMG. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So we'll appreciate you convening this meeting to approve this draft report. I suppose just to stress that it is indicative. Hopefully it follows on well from the training session we held in the September meeting, whereby we outlined our responsibilities with regard to the financial statements, but obviously with regard to VFM. So the Auditor's annual report is intended to provide an overview of the outcome of the audit, both financial statements, but also our commentary on the value for money. So I think just to stress at this point that we are still at the risk assessment phase. A lot of the research has been completed, but there are still some areas that we need to complete. We're still working with management to collate some of that information, and then there's some further work to do on the risks, or the risks that we've identified so far to date, which I'll pick up on. In the executive summary, effectively that summarises the fact that we are required to present a version of this Auditor's annual report by the 30th of November, and that's required by the Code of Audit Practice. There is obviously no commentary on our financial statements work at this point, as that's very much still ongoing. But the intention is obviously we'll bring a final report to the February meeting next year. Page 5 provides some view on some of our other powers that we may have. I'm pleased to report there's nothing there, around public interest, judicial reviews, advisory notices, but that's just there for information as something that we could be required to report on if needed. And then the value for money summary on page 7 hopefully gives you some overview and insight, and hopefully sort of some of that sort of terminology that you're seeing in there is reflective of some of that training session we held, and some, in terms of the work we do and the criterion we are looking at when we're looking at value for money. So you'll see it says TBC. That's just to stress that obviously it is indicative, and we're still working through some of that. We have obviously flagged that risk around governance. And I think it's worth stressing it's not the entire governance of the organisation. It is an element of the governance criteria on which we look at. And that's specifically around the authority's response to the Ofsted report, but specifically the action plan that's been put in place and how effectively the authority is implementing that action plan. Again, it's worth saying that is a risk at this point. It's not a weakness. It's not a significant weakness. We've still got a bit more work to do to establish if we deem there to be a significant weakness in arrangements, and that's what we're working through at the moment. And obviously we will provide a final view on that in the final report. We did identify a weakness last year. I would refer back to last year's Auditor's annual report. In response to the Ofsted, and that was predominantly around the actual the outcome of that review, and that being the authority being under requires improvement. So a lot of the work this year is about following up as to what the authority's response was to that review, and what actions have been implemented, and how effective the arrangements are in terms of implementing the action plan. I don't propose going into the details of each page around each of the criteria, and happy to pick up any particular questions you may have. Hopefully it provides a useful commentary on the arrangements around financial sustainability, governance and improving economy and effectiveness. As I say, there are elements that we need to sort of bolster there as we work through the finalisation of the risk assessment. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
Okay, I have 3 questions, but I'll start with just the one at the moment. So, as the Audit and Standards Committee of Staffordshire County Council, we are seeking assurances that all statutory requirements on the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014 and the Code of Audit Practice will have been met by the 30th of November 2025 deadline. I'm also aware that you've probably just clarified that for us as well in your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. I think the requirement is to present a version of the Auditors Annual Report by the 30th of November, yeah.
Okay, if I can move on to the next question that I have then. Can you confirm that you have the necessary resources and capacity to complete all outstanding audit work, including the financial statements, opinion, value for money assessment and whole of government accounts procedures by the statutory deadline of the 30th of November 2025? If there are any risks to completion, please outline them, and mitigation, please, and please clarify for everyone. Thank you.
I think so. For clarity, the requirement is to produce the Auditors Annual Report by the 30th of November, but we are still working towards the backstop date of the end of February. So all work on financial statements and value for money will be completed by the 28th of February 2026, in line with the required timetable.
And my final one will be, can you confirm that based on your audit work to date, which I think you have already, the Audit and Standards Committee and Staffordshire County Council have provided all the information, access and responses requested in a timely manner, and that there are no outstanding actions or omissions on our part that could impact the completion of the audit of compliance with statutory requirements? If any gaps remain, please specify them as soon as you can, please, and so they can be addressed. Thank you.
I think I would stress that we obviously need to be I think we've said previously that we need to sort of be moving this cycle, bringing it forward, should we say, in terms of making sure we're completing more financial statement work, more value for money work in advance of the 30th of November. And that sort of goes in hand with this sort of rebuilding approach, rebuilding assurance that we talked about at the last committee. There is a value for money questionnaire which we send out to management, and I would say that management's been a little bit slow in terms of getting some of that information. I think we would definitely push to make sure that's done in a more timely way in future years, to give us more time to digest that information and incorporate it into our risk assessment. But as I say, it is a journey. I think equally we as the audit team have got more work to do to make sure we can get through more work, as I've just said, by this date. So when we're in this position this time next year, we'd hope to be more progressed than we are, say, this year. But I think there's enough to be getting on with. There's enough cooperation with management in order to deliver what we need to by the end of February.
Any more questions? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Can I address my first 2 questions to page 7 and page 13? So in terms of page 7, it's the executive summary. I can see that. I can see that as of the date of this report, we have not issued a public interest report this year. Equally, in terms of the recommendations, it says, as at this date of the report, we've not raised any other recommendations, and equally, there's no advisory notes. I also note on page 13, at the bottom, it says, we have not identified a risk of significant weakness in the Council's financial stability, sustainability arrangements to date. I'm assuming that those are indicative of a well-run, financially run council. That's my first question. And my second question relates to the governance arrangements, which is on page 15, where services receive regular financial updates, and then, you know, the management team receive an update, and then the senior leadership team receive an update, and then the cabinet receive an update. I'm assuming that you've checked that actually it's not just county council employees who have said that's what happens. You've checked that actually that is what happens, and that is what you would presumably expect in a well-run, financially run authority.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, absolutely. I think as part of this, as I say, this risk assessment work we do. We make sure we request evidence from the senior finance business partners to the finance information that they're sharing at the more local directorate level leadership, and then we look then to see how that then feeds through to the upwards reporting through the different committees, and then finally to cabinet, and then eventually council. So in answer to your question, yes, and absolutely, that is definitely indicative of a well-run, soundly run local authority. Yeah, so I hope that answers both questions. Yeah.
Councillor Wellens.
Thank you, Chair. On page 9 of the auditor report confirms that we inherited a £53.6 million deficit in the high needs blocks and a continued annual overspend of £27 million to enable the new administration to take corrective action. Can the officers provide a costed breakdown of each intervention planned and the expected reduction each action will deliver? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, if I can answer that. So there is a deficit mitigation plan that goes to Schools Forum. So the Schools Forum is the body that approves that plan. It has been on a couple of occasions now to that meeting and been approved there. The deficit management plan will reduce the deficit, but it will not get rid of it completely. That's not possible given the current funding levels and demand levels for that service area. But I would refer you to the papers to Schools Forum, and if you'd like to see a copy of the specific report, I can send that to you directly and to circulate it around the committee. But that's where the deficit management plan gets approved at Schools Forum.
Thank you for that.
Francis.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Robert, for the indicative report with your early insights before you issue the full report. My question is around the risk around the Ofsted report. What's the worst case scenario? The members might be interested to know the agency in addressing that risk. What could be the really worst case scenario there?
So obviously the officers of the authority will own the response to that report. We are looking to see whether the arrangements are in place to provide the necessary oversight over that action plan. So in terms of AGN 03, which we would have referred to in our training in September, in terms of what sort of dictates the framework of how we carry out our value for money work. The point is that we're looking to sort of establish whether it would be a weakness if there is a failure in the authority's ability to act on a particular action plan. So that would be our sort of conclusion. If we feel that the authority have appropriate arrangements to deliver the action plan, it might not necessarily be as fast or as quick as they may like. Then it might not necessarily constitute a weakness. We've just got to make a bit of a judgment there as to the effectiveness of those arrangements. But I suppose the ownership of those actions and I suppose the outcome basis of it is very much the responsibility of the authority. If that makes sense.
Councillor Wallens.
Thank you, Chair. And I just got the one more question. On page 11 of the report, the auditors warn that the balancing that balancing the MTFS using reserves is not financially sustainable beyond 2028-29. For transparency, can officers produce a reserves-free MTFS model showing the true structural financial position inherited by the Reform administration? Thank you.
Thank you. So the MTFS report from February that was approved in February also includes the Section 25 statement on the robustness of reserves. So that's a statement which is set out in regulation that the Section 151 officer must produce and publish. And that gives his opinion on the robustness of our reserves, what they're being held for, what they are earmarked for, whether they're enough or not. So that is publicly available in the February MTFS. Obviously, given that it's November now, we are working on updating that MTFS, and that will come forward to Cabinet in due course, and that will have a refreshed Section 25 statement, which will again give the Section 151 officer's view of the robustness of reserves in there. Further details on the reserves can be seen in the Statement of Accounts, and in particular I would direct members to the Movement in Reserves statement. So it's one of the financial statements. It comes fairly early on in the document, so you don't necessarily need to trawl through all the notes to find it. So that's readily found as well on the website. And that will tell members the total amount of reserves that are held. It breaks them down into whether they're for revenue or capital, if they belong to schools, which are ring fence for schools and we can't use them. And so you can see that breakdown in that financial statement there.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Pert.
Thank you. Can I just pick up on page 15 at the bottom line where it says the CQC rating, it mentions that in 24-25 there were no published inspections, and I'm not convinced that's actually factually correct, because I actually personally took part in the CQC inspection of adult social care in February, and we were rated a very strong good. So I would hate that to be not part of the report itself. That's just a point of detail. But I did want to stick on social care, if I could, please. Under page 12, there is a discussion about, and by the way, I should have said at the outset, I found this report really nice to read. Often auditors' reports are, the thing that would send you to sleep, and that's putting it quite mildly. And this I really quite enjoyed, sort of flicking through. It was, it touched the key things and was very readable. So thank you for that. The bit I wanted to try and understand a bit more was this ratio of usable reserves to net revenue expenditure, and the social care ratio being amongst the highest. I was just trying to understand the perspective. What does that really mean? Does that mean we spend more comparatively on adult social care than other authorities? Does it factor in some sort of deprivation rating? Does it factor in an age rating? Or is it just a, well, can you explain it a bit more, please?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, I will revert back on that CQC review. I think when I looked at it, I thought it was the report was published in May, and so I was taking the view that then fell into the 25-26 year. But absolutely, if the inspection actually took place in February 25. Then I think we need to probably bring out some commentary on that. So that's fair enough. In terms of those reserve comparisons, they're intended to sort of provide some sort of benchmarking against other local, other county councils, and so in terms of those ratios, if I just double check what that is, can you just, is it page? Yeah, so the ratios is looking to sort of establish, well, what is ideally, if you've got a sort of a lower ratio, that would create sort of higher risk. But what we're saying is that effectively this organisation is slightly higher, but it's benchmarked against other counties. But we can provide perhaps a little bit, we can elaborate a little bit more on what that means to sort of bring it to life a little bit more in the final report. We think that would be helpful.
Through you, Chair. I think it would personally, and not because I used to run adult social care. It's not because of that.
Yeah.
It's more because if you look at where our risks are as a county council, we've got two significant levels of areas of risk. One is children's services, which I think is adequately picked up in the report. But the second one is the growing ageing population and the growing acuity in adult social care. And if you think that 80% of the council's budget is spent in social services, in social care, whether it's children's or adults, then I think that would be quite useful because it shows a direction of travel, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do that. We'll elaborate further in the final report.
Councillor Clizzy.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Robert. Just wanted to touch on, obviously, the work and the audit work nationally that you do across councils, and you mentioned about benchmarking, particularly difficult situations we've seen in Birmingham and Nottingham, and based on those early warning indicators, what control practices are you seeing within those councils from lessons learned that you can bring to Staffordshire County Council to make sure we're geared correctly for those elements like child services and financial planning?
I suppose the benchmarking we've looked at specifically is around the value for money profiles. So in terms of doing like-for-like comparisons and sort of looking for those insights into those authorities and how that then benchmarks against, in terms of controls, exactly the internal control environment of those organisations. That isn't necessarily something we would do. I suppose what we might look to do is ask the authority, have you consulted with colleagues, peers in other county councils? And when I say county councils, they're sort of effectively the best benchmark to compare this authority with, to establish, you know, are there sort of lessons learned work that goes on. For example, they might do with other West Midlands organisations, for example. But I think that would probably rest more with the authority, and then we might say, well, can you present what sort of findings, the outcome of that benchmarking or work you've done? Can we bring that? Can we sort of provide some commentary on that in our report?
Yeah, I think it's important that we do learn from other councils that are struggling, especially being proactive around, you know, setting those risks elements and then mitigating those risks, and then making sure that we're prepared for the future. I think that's definitely an opportunity to take away.
Just in response to taking those lessons learned, the Corporate Assurance Board do look at all public interest reports that have been issued, and also the Section 114 reports, looking at where those early warning systems are, where those early red flags are, and make sure that within our own arrangements, that wherever possible we can mitigate those known risks that have been experienced by other councils. Okay.
Councillor Baker.
Thanks for the report. Just a question on the governance and the review of the Corporate Overview Scrutiny Committee and the Cabinet about the integrated performance report. On the last line it says, while savings and cost reductions are not itemised separately, they're reflected in the overall financial position. Is it something that you would like to see, like say the underspend in the report, it is itemised out, what the makeup is it, and what's it made out of? Is that something you would like to have on that report?
I don't think I have a strong opinion on that. I think as long as the committee who are reviewing that report are able to make effective decisions from what's presented to them, then that should be sufficient in terms of the arrangements that we're looking to comment on. It's not something that we would specifically recommend, because whilst I suppose it's worth saying that if we do identify a weakness in arrangements, we would be required to include a recommendation in our auditor's annual report. We do actually then have an opportunity where to sort of identify what we call performance improvement observations, which are sort of a lesser recommendation. It's not in response to a significant weakness, but where we think there might be some sort of potential for improvement in a particular arrangement. But to be honest, I don't have a strong opinion on that. I think that would be something that certainly to discuss internally if committee members think that would provide greater insight into the report itself.
Councillor Wallens.
Thank you, Chair. On pages 14 and 15, identify slow progress on the Ofsted improvement plan and flag a risk of significant governance weakness. Which improvement actions were already overdue before May 2025, and what are the biggest inherent obstacles preventing timely progress?
I suppose that's why I'd need to caveat that that's what we're doing at the moment. We're unable to comment specifically about which ones are past the overdue date or whatever. That's what we're doing at the moment in terms of explore the extent of the implementation of the action plan. I think if there was a specific query, if you wanted to know right now where is the authority up to, and I suppose I think you could obviously contact the relevant officer. But yeah, just to caveat, that is something that we're looking at the moment.
Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, Chair. I think a good interim report this. I mean, I'm sort of concentrating particularly on the back of the questions about some other councils, such as Nottingham and Birmingham, I think were mentioned as not being in a good state, as we've seen in the media. I think financial sustainability is a key issue, really, and on page 11, the council's ability to underspend by 5.3 million on a 666.7 million budget while maintaining service delivery and increasing reserves at the same time. Just for the auditor, does that reflect on a financial management and government arrangements that are robust in this council with the strength of controls that are in place? Given that this covers the financial year up to March, I think that's really important for people to understand. But is the robustness of the financial management and government arrangements, in your view, working with other councils across the country as well and concentrating on Staffordshire, a good result?
Yes, I think so. I think that question is effectively similar to the colleague sat next to you in terms of absolutely. The fact that underspend is indicative of suggesting that the authority is robustly managed. And I think the fact that we haven't necessarily identified any risk of weakness is absolutely a good result. I think obviously we need to continue sort of working through elements of that risk assessment, but at this point, it's a good result all around.
Francis, thank you.
Is it fair at this point, Robert, to tell the members that this report is a good indication of the direction of the audit conclusions? There will be no surprises in the full and final report?
Yeah, I think so. I think particularly on the financial sustainability, the authority does not have a raft of huge saving targets it needs to meet in order to deliver its financial outturn. Particularly for, we are looking retrospectively. I think it's always important to stress that this is up to 31st of March 25. Ideally, we're into 25, 26. I think everyone would value for this to be a bit more sort of up to date of where are you at the moment. So just to emphasise that, and that's why I sort of said at the beginning about we need to work really hard to really bring that cycle forward. So at this point, we're giving you a more sort of up to date position. But yeah, I think as at the 31st of March, I can't see there being any sort of change in our conclusions around financial sustainability. So in answer to the question, yes, I think there should be no surprises.
Councillor Pert.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just look more broadly? Because what I think I understand with the position of auditors nationally is there's a shortage of auditors, huge demands in terms of shortfall between capacity and demand. Clearly a legal requirement from government to pick up the ante after the last couple of years. How are we looking versus, how are we as an authority looking in terms of hitting all the requirements versus some of our near neighbours, for example?
I think we've spoke about it in previous committees, I think probably in July and September, about the fact that we and the authority are on a journey to making sure we can bring back or rebuild is the terminology we use around rebuilding the assurance in terms of getting the authority back to a qualified audit opinion. So I think there's still quite a bit of work to do here in terms of us getting to a position where we can get to, I suppose, a clean opinion. But I think if you recall, I think we presented a slide at the training session last time in terms of the time it's going to take to get there. I think that we as a firm are working hard to ensure that we try and bring that work forward each year to ensure that we can make that progress to bringing the authority back to where it needs to be. And I think that this authority is I suppose, in the middle of the pack a little bit, obviously because it's got quite a few years of disclaimed opinions that we've got to work sort of through and rebuild. It will take a little bit longer than, say, for example, an authority that might only have 1 year of disclaimed opinion, or indeed that there are a number of authorities who just have clean opinions for the last, however many years. So yeah, I think it's a journey. We're working hard to make sure we try and deliver to that, and I think you would just hope that we'd be able to demonstrate next year that we've made further progress in rebuilding that assurance.
Thank you. I think and I do remember the conversation at the last audit committee, and that was helpful in terms of positioning. And what I was trying to get to was a comparison with other authorities. Do you think some other authorities are going to miss these deadlines? And in which case, what's your feeling from an industry point of view? Is it 50% are going to miss the deadline, or actually is everyone going to hit it? That was probably where I was trying to get to. Notwithstanding that I think that we should place on record our thanks, if we're a financially well-run authority, we should place on record our thanks to the senior officers, Pete Shakespeare, Catherine Ross and Rachel Spain. But can we just focus in on the comparison piece, please?
So I think the Code of Audit Practices has brought in these backstop dates to make sure we try and have a sort of clean edge on finishing audits, and by that point that each audit firm has been able to provide some type of opinion to whichever authority they're working on. I wouldn't like to say the stats in terms of who's going to complete that, who's going to meet those, but I would say the vast majority will meet the backstop date. That's the intention of it, and that's why it's been pushed back to February, rather than having what it used to be around the end of November. So I wouldn't like to say exactly how many are going to meet that, but I think more will meet it this year than say last year, for example. So I think as a sector, I think it's moving in the right direction, and that's exactly what I hope, you as members, authorities, colleagues in other authorities would want to hear.
So I'd like to say thank you all for your hard work and contributions today. The next meeting will be on the 9th of December at 10 AM. I'd like to now close the meeting, and thank you. Have a nice day.